When Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in 1981, it reinvented a genre that had been running on echoes for decades. Thanks to the deft touch of men with beards and hats, it developed into a franchise of near universal appeal. But with fortune and glory came imitation, and that's what this video's about.
This could be a disaster.
Nuts to you.
That means treasure maps and booby traps, bad soldiers and big boulders, poor clones of Shankara stones, and fake trails to false grails. So whether you're a rogue adventurer or just a part-time professor, hold on to your potatoes, because we're going for a ride.
Prepare yourself, oh my brothers, for the white twin of heaven has come to castrate the sun.
Indiana Jones already did that.
Something is not kosher here.
These pieces belong in a museum.
You would think, but what fun would that be?
We begin in Italy, where at the 1981 Venice Film Festival, exploitationeer Antonio Margheriti was looking for something to steal. A target appeared on day 5 when the audience emerged from the new Steven Spielberg movie raving about its brilliance.
It has everything. It's marvelous.
Within 4 months, Margheriti and his producer had spirited a crew to the Philippines armed with a screenplay about the hunt for a golden snake.
If this priceless object should fall into the wrong hands, all of Southeast Asia could be destabilized.
You can tell that to the natives, but I'm not buying it.
That's about all any of us are ever given to go on, but leading the search are American adventurer David Warbeck and British Army officer John Steiner.
Captain David Franks, British Intelligence.
It all works quite well, especially the delightful model work. It was also a hit, so Margheriti repeated the formula 2 years later, reconvening much of the same cast and crew in Turkey to make Ark of the Sun God, which thanks to David Warbeck is another winner.
You smarmy bastard.
Strangely, it features a scene much like the one in the yet-to-be-released Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, in which Indy searches subterranean Venice for clues. Imitation Indy descends into similar rat-filled catacombs which are set on fire by similar religious zealots, trying to prevent the discovery of a similar ancient relic.
Hold it! Okay, shithead, you asked for it! Son of a bitch!
These Margheriti movies look even better when they're compared to other early offerings. Invaders of the Lost Gold makes about as much sense as its title, perhaps because it was produced by an American working out of Hong Kong and shot in the Philippines by an Italian crew headed by an English director using equipment he'd never seen before.
Damn, I cannot make head or tail of these Japanese dials!
As with most early responders to major blockbusters, Raiders' first imitations involved tropes from adjacent genres. European producers usually chose to shoot in the Philippines, and as they all believed the jungles there were full of the Vietnam War, it was Namsploitation with which Indy was most often crossbred.
They thought the war was over. 54 million in gold changed their minds.
But it was Thailand's Chalong Pakjavit who perfected this chimera with a string of indie-tinged men-on-a-mission movies like The Lost Idol, in which Eric Estrada has to battle dodgy effects and unfamiliar headgear, and Gold Raiders, in which Robert Ginty races to beat communism to the prize, which he does with a flying motorcycle powered by crystals and made from spaceship metal.
God damn! First time in my life I ever saw a flying motorcycle?
Indy flirted with less obvious genres too. Scarab also stars Robert Ginty, but this time he's an investigative reporter on the trail of Rip Torn, who's a Nazi, a physicist, and an Egyptian god. I guess it's an art house thriller because it's entirely unpredictable. Ferdinando Baldi's Treasure of the Four Crowns was distributed by Canon, which technically makes it their first foray into indie-sploitation. It's notable for 3D sequences that are still described as innovative despite clearly being rubbish, at least whenever they're not ripping off Raiders of the Lost Ark. In Spain's Yellow Hair and the Fortress of Gold, Lauren Landon plays a blonde-haired, Canadian-accented Native American searching for a lost cache of Aztec-breaded chicken. Or something like that, I wasn't really paying attention.
Mister, either you hand over that nugget,
or they're gonna be shipping you out of here with no place to go but hell.
Meanwhile, the UK delivered What Waits Below, which has a far too good for this crap Robert Powell accidentally leading a bunch of archaeologists into an H.G. Wells adaptation. It's the only script ever written by Hammer director and David Lynch cinematographer Freddie Francis, and there are some great lines delivered with real B-movie gusto.
There's a man lost in here somewhere, and there are extremely important anthropological considerations also.
I don't give a damn about anthropology!
Come on.
And then there's Jess Franco's Diamonds of Kilimanjaro, which is Indy crossed with something, but I don't know what.
Whether she's alive or dead, it makes no difference.
A Jess Franco movie, I guess. Like Hunters of the Golden Cobra, it's about a jungle expedition aiming to recover both treasure and a long-lost white girl raised among a native tribe. Only this one was lost alongside her father, or godfather, depending on the version, and he makes her run about half naked, calling him Big White Chief.
Big White Chief, may I speak with you?
Did I mention it's a Jess Franco movie?
Say it again.
All right. Big White Chief.
That's better.
It's incredibly shoddy whichever of the versions you watch, but the longer one has a scene in which a conversation's interrupted by unrelated stock footage of a rhino charging a jeep. But the same shot pops up again in the next scene, this time in context, and a little research confirms its first appearance was accidental. It was literally cut in by mistake without anybody noticing.
What?
Things get stranger once the expedition begins, and the same sequence plays out twice in the space of 10 minutes. Once with the right audio.
What do you mean traipsing around naked like some whore, you bitch?
And once with the wrong audio. Like most of these European movies, The Adventurer in Diamonds of Kilimanjaro is a cruel, violent, ultra-macho sort, which tells us something of how Indiana Jones was initially perceived as a character, especially in Europe. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, he may have claimed moral authority as an archaeologist, but we still meet him stealing relics and selling them on, no questions asked.
Yes, the museum will buy them as usual, no questions asked. Yes, they are nice.
Indiana Jones is not an archaeologist, he's a plunderer.
He's a grave robber.
He was softened in Temple of Doom, but he really was introduced as a grave robber, quick to kill and apparently sociopathic in his emotional reaction to doing so. But while Europe was mainly interested in Indy's brutish side, Hollywood interpreted him as a lightly romantic anti-hero, like Tom Selleck in High Road to China. Still a bit of a cynic and frequently a drunk, but always the cuddly kind of drunk, the kind who can be woken like this without reacting violently.
Carlouche!
If she'd tried that on David Warbeck, she'd have taken a Bowie knife to the throat. Selleck's Patrick O'Malley might be a little coarse and rough around the edges, but he's ultimately a gentleman.
I find her eyes objectionable.
It was the 1930s, though.
Very good.
High Road to China was the first in a wave of American romantic adventure movies that owe as much to Hollywood's classic screwball comedies as its adventure serials, and all seem to involve an exasperated man being mismatched for comic effect with an exasperating woman.
What'd you do? Wake up this morning and say, "Today, I'm gonna ruin a man's life"?
Romancing the Stone turned the formula into gold, grossing over $100 million on a budget of 10, mainly thanks to the chemistry between stars Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. Intriguingly, the studio wanted Deborah Winger, but when she met Douglas to discuss the role, she apparently got drunk on tequila and bit him so hard it drew blood.
Yeah, that was a little bone of contention.
It isn't a bad movie Bible kind of movie, and nor's the disappointing sequel, which separates the two characters so they don't banter and makes them rich so we don't like them.
It's a piss-poor idea. It's nothing but trouble.
No matter how much I hate it, Cannon's King Solomon's Mines is a bad movie Bible kind of movie. It's based on H. Rider Haggard's 19th century blockbuster novel, in which big game hunter Alan Quatermain, which I know is meant to be pronounced Quatermain, but I'm not going to argue with John Rhys Davies,
Quatermain,
leads an expedition deep into Africa in search of a fabled treasure trove, so it made for an ideal indie knockoff, especially after Cannon added Nazis, slavery jokes and Sharon Stone, all of which have come a long way in the 4 decades since it was released.
Prisoners?
Slaves. For $100 you can own one for life.
$100? That's terrible.
You can always bargain.
Yeah, this character's got a few issues. Producer Menachem Golan had actually wanted Kathleen Turner for the female lead, having been impressed by her performance in Romancing the Stone. According to legend, he demanded the signing of That Stone Woman, only for an underling to misunderstand and cast Sharon Stone by mistake. As unlikely as that story is, I don't know how else she could have got the part, because she's just awful.
What's going on?
A sequel, which was shot alongside the original, followed in 1986 and drags James Earl Jones and a strikingly bewigged Henry Silver into its mire. This one makes a little more sense, but it's still full of horrible dialogue, wonky effects, and Sharon Stone.
Now that's not fair!
It also introduces us to this genre's great shame, which is a propensity to cast white actors as non-white characters who are portrayed appallingly.
Warned of this, the ground devouring intruders, the golden orb, tempting the fates. So it comes to pass.
Golan always wanted to make a third Quatermain film, and as late as 2011 was touting a script that an aging Richard Chamberlain had allegedly approved. He couldn't make it happen, but producer Harry Alan Towers did with High Adventure, which stars Thomas Ian Griffith as grandson Chris Quatermain in a contemporary set search for the tomb of Alexander the Great. It makes the mismatched romance thing work quite well, and the villains are post-apocalyptic steampunk hobos, which is fun, and I think part of a pleasingly weird sense of humour.
If I don't make it through there, squash is for dumped with the biggest rock you can find.
Just give me the nod, Chris.
I'll be dead, Johnny.
Quatermain, or Quatermains, had numerous further adventures on both big screen and small, most famously in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and most bizarrely in Alan Quatermain and the Spear of Destiny, which I'll get to later and might be amazing, I'm not sure.
Some say it has mystical powers that can grant its possessor unlimited power.
So having established that Europe's early indies were rapey scumbags and Hollywood's were romantic anti-heroes, do we dare wonder what the product of a Franco-American co-production would look like? It fell to Emmanuel director Zsazsa to decide, so take a guess.
It's not very smart of you to refuse my friendship, Gwendolyn. It's your only chance.
Luxuriant softcore crossover The Perils of Gwendolyn in the Land of the Yik Yak stars Whitesnake video vixen Tawny Kitane as the titular Gwen, a naive teenager who hires Brent Huff's expat hustler Willard to help her find her missing father. The tone's set in their first meeting when Willard sexually assaults her because he wants to hear her scream, but it's okay, she starts to enjoy it and that makes him lose interest.
Come on, you scream!
More again.
More? Scream or I'll kill you!
More, please.
Oh, women.
In another scene, a cult of subjugated women are driven wild by a glimpse of little Willard, and in the finale they fight to the death for the right to have sex with him. Much of this could reasonably be described as problematic.
Go ahead, drop me. But it will be your name I scream on the way down. I belong to you, body and soul.
But there are other early American crossovers that work less like a Saturday night in Andrew Tate's basement. For me, the one that stands out, despite a lot of repetition, is 1983's Bimini Code, in which hog-riding surf chicks Cheryl and Stacy overhear a third-hand story about an abduction that may or may not have happened.
Come on, Rick. You don't believe him. The cops don't believe him.
Look, Stacy, you don't kidnap a kid over peanuts.
God, Stacy. Despite that, and despite running a scuba shop rather than a detective agency, the girls drop everything to investigate, and there are two reasons why we should care. The first is a screenplay so incoherent it can't even decide what the villains want, variously describing them as drug runners needing to silence a witness, tomb raiders in search of a Mayan relic, and spies trying to steal a formula for cold fusion. The second reason's more compelling and might be best described as the experimental ADR.
Dynamite set. Clearing out.
That's two divers dubbed by the same voice actor talking to each other underwater despite having regulators in their mouths. I've covered movies that do this before, but Bimini Code takes the idea further by allowing snorkelers to speak to each other and to people on the telephone.
There's nothing here, just some ship bolts and an old bell.
Bring them up. We'll follow. And wait.
It transpires this reality-mocking communication system isn't entirely secure because the villain's able to use her phone to hack the girls' scuba gear and interrupt their conversation.
If it wasn't for this, I could have been snorkeling in Barbados. Forgive the inconvenience, girls, but I'm afraid your little escapade has come to an end.
In fact, the movie's whole approach to communication's bizarre. At one point, a helicopter pilot talks to the girls over a radio they don't have, and they reply by shouting.
You folks aware you're in a restricted area?
We're on our way out. But back there in the water, you might find a lady with an interesting story to tell you.
1984's Hero hails from India's Telugu language film business based in the southern city of Hyderabad and stars superstar Chiranjeevi as Professor Krishna, an archaeologist who, like Indy, is basically a tomb raider with a badge. Also like Indy, we meet him relieving an indigenous people of sacred relics in a shot-for-shot recreation of Raiders' opening scene. The rest of the movie's probably less derivative of Indy. Ready? There are no subtitles, so your guess is as good as mine when it comes to the details, but we don't need to know exactly what's going on. I'm sure there's a reason why we spend so long watching this elderly couple sing, dance and crawl, and why one of their routines appears to be a tribute to toothpaste. But by the time the wife jumps out of Django's coffin to machine gun the villains, I'd come to peace with my ignorance. We eventually cut back to Raiders when Indiana Jones and Indian Marion locate the Ark and become trapped in a snake-filled well of souls alike, before nailing the shot-for-shot scene steal hat-trick with the truck fight sequence, which is repurposed surprisingly effectively as the movie's climax. There are some unexpected challenges, but our hero ultimately prevails and gets to kick back with his harem and await a sequel. It's time to take a quick look at what inspired the Inspirer, to ask where Indy came from and what it is these imitations take from him. In the early 70s, George Lucas famously came up with the idea of overhauling and updating the adventure serials he'd enjoyed as a child. But while the escapades of a cowboy, a princess and a junior space wizard are perhaps the best known consequence of that brainwave, even at the start his thoughts were never limited to science fiction.
And the other idea I had at the same time was really to do it about an archaeologist who goes around finding ancient artifacts that have sort of a supernatural flavor to them. And both of them would be kind of a serial, non-stop action kind of adventure.
Proto-Batman Western Zorro's Fighting Legion and the Nazi propaganda piece Spy Smasher are the two serials most frequently credited with inspiring Indiana Jones. Drums of Fu Manchu and Darkest Africa bear an even closer resemblance, kind of. While Jungle Girl and sequel Perils of Nyoka are the most similar. I wish they'd drawn more on these two, actually. Indy would have benefited from a pet gorilla called Satan.
Let me send men with you.
Satan could crush a dozen men. He'll protect me.
Once Star Wars began to gather momentum, Lucas put Indy on the back burner. But in 1975, he took a couple of weeks out to work up a pitch with writer-friend Philip Kaufman, who made Indy less edgy and introduced the Ark of the Covenant as MacGuffin. Lucas suggested Kaufman direct, but he was busy with the outlaw Josie Wales, which put the project on hold, but it got going again 2 years later on that famous Hawaiian holiday shared by Lucas and Steven Spielberg.
And I said, well, you know what, I've always wanted to direct a James Bond picture. And George, so I got that beat. I said, what do you mean? He said, I have a better idea. It's called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Spielberg loved the idea and suggested writer Lawrence Kasdan help he and Lucas flesh it out. All three men drew heavily not just on serials but movies, and many of Raiders' most memorable moments are essentially imitations themselves. Three of Raiders' most frequently reinterpreted are the rolling boulder trap from 1958's Journey to the Center of the Earth, the chase sequence in which Indy climbs about underneath and is dragged behind a moving truck, which is usually credited to this scene from Stagecoach, but looks more like this one from the following year's Virginia City. And while the deadpan murder of the Arab swordsman was apparently improvised on set by Harrison Ford, there is a similar moment in Andy Sedaris' movie Seven.
Hi, my ass.
Was there anything Andy Sedaris couldn't do? Spielberg cites Treasure of the Sierra Madre as a big influence, particularly on the Peruvian opening scene, and Lawrence of Arabia on the way he shot the Tunisian landscape that stood in for Egypt. He's also mentioned Green Hell and Watusi, and he actually screened China and The Secret of the Incas for the cast and crew. The latter lent its haunting title music to The Big Lebowski, but a more relevant contribution to the future was the costume worn by Charlton Heston's Harry Steele. I don't buy speculation that Indy's whole character was based on him, though.
You haven't got a thing. To me, you're just a big tub of guts. I don't need you.
Jungle Girl and the Perils of Nyoka seem to have contributed a number of ideas and memorable moments to the Temple of Doom in particular, including the scene in which our heroes are flooded out of a tunnel complex, and more generic stuff like the booby-trap spike room and rope bridge over crocodiles, which I prefer to think comes from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
What is your favorite color? Blue. Right, off you go.
Oh, thank you.
Lost Horizon and 1952's Hong Kong also contributed scenes and texture, but perhaps the biggest overall influence on Temple of Doom is Cary Grant adventure movie Gunga Din. Structurally and thematically it's noticeably similar, from opening on the strike of a gong to the decimated village to the Kali worshipping cult.
Kill for the love of killing! Kill for the love of Kali! Kill! Kill! Kill!
Spielberg's mentioned that he sees James Bond as an Indy antecedent, hence Sean Connery's casting in The Last Crusade, but I don't think he had much of a direct influence, unlike Western McKenna's Gold, which features some very similar plot elements, and the Road 2 movies, particularly Zanzibar, which donated many of the lighter moments. There's a lot more, of course, but there's also a lot of ground to cover, and we need to get on with it.
Adventure? Who are you? Indiana Lieberman?
The Temple of Doom landed in 1984, and despite being darker in tone, actually lightened its lead character.
By doing a kind of dark version of the Indiana Jones series, it gave permission to poke some fun at ourselves.
Instead of fortune and glory, he's all about saving the children. We don't see him steal any relics, and he hardly murders anybody, all of which makes him a more straightforward hero. Not that anyone in Europe noticed. It would be a couple of years before Italy in particular changed its approach, but 1986 brought a new player to the table. Jackie Chan's Armour of God was the first of a handful of kung fu crossovers from Hong Kong, and has Jackie doing all the things he does best. Fighting, clowning, and nearly dying when a branch broke on a subsequent attempt at this jump, and he fell headfirst onto the rocks below. He describes the resulting injury as the worst he's ever had, with a fragment of broken bone detaching from his cranium and entering his brain, permanently damaging his hearing. The lucky few get to feel the hole in his head.
Oh my God, yes, yes, yes!
Oh, hell no.
I could talk about this movie forever, but less than a week after it debuted, Wong Jing's strikingly similar Magic Crystal did likewise, becoming the first legitimate blockbuster for Hong Kong's unholy hybrid of Jerry Bruckheimer and the Farrelly brothers.
Mine, I've used both of them.
It stars Andy Lau and Wong himself as troubleshooting super agents who become embroiled in a Soviet scheme for world domination when Wong's idiot child acquires a talking rock.
He's a dirty man. He wants to see Winnie undress. Huh?
In addition to Wong and Lau, we get Nat Chan, Wong Mei Mei, and the 80s action super sprinkles that is Cynthia Rothrock versus Richard Norton.
Didn't I say a woman can only beat her husband?
Depends on the woman.
This is their second movie together, but it features their first on-screen fights and shows why there were so many more over the years. Wong turned up again later in the year in a much more adult-oriented adventure, which saw Chinese literary icons and sometime collaborators Wisely and Dr. Yun make their big-screen debuts in The Seventh Curse. At least one of them should have paid closer attention to Indy. Their first movie's all about a blood curse threatening to break out of Yun's leg, a predicament deriving from an encounter in which he was cursed by a Thai wizard and had to eat a mysterious water nymph's magical boob egg to save himself. Given the director was Rikyo's Lam Gai Kai, none of this should be a surprise. And nor should flourishes of bad taste like this marvellous child-juicing machine. Chow Yun-fat and Maggie Cheung add considerable star power to the Seventh Curse, which only serves to highlight the lack of it in the following year's Legend of Wisely, which, like all these movies, hates stuntmen. It's great, but a bit buttoned down, at least until a mountain turns into a giant mechanical dragon and flies off into space. For those who find The Legend of Wisely a little sensible, there's always Mirage from Choi Soo-ming, a director known for ruthlessly eliminating any vestige of sense, usually by putting stuntmen on it and then blowing it up. Like Wong Jing in The Magic Crystal, Choi co-stars as the comedy relief element of our hero's team, and he saved the most dangerous stunts for himself, because this is him. With fire-retardant gel on his hands, Choi struggled to lift the bike, but was determined to get the shot and ended up burning himself. And of course the multiple takes required to complete the sequence meant he had to do it again straight away. All this means that after Jackie Chan, Choi became the second actor-director to horribly injure himself making a Hong Kong Indy cash-in. Only he did it in even more spectacular style. Twice. There were more of these magnificent movies, including Michelle Yeoh's Magnificent Warriors, prior to Jackie Chan returning to put the movement on hiatus with Armour of God sequel Operation Condor, in which he only broke his sternum.
And then... God, that must have hurt, man.
Back in the US, Temple of Doom's move towards exotic mismatched romantic screwball comedy adventure meant most filmmakers were still focused on a subgenre that desperately needs a name. But at Canon, they'd begun to adapt the formula for more specific audiences, including children, apparently.
The Atacamians are the fiercest, most violent race in the world.
How bad can they be if they watch TV?
The last anthropologist to study them was found dead with his sexual organs stuck down his throat.
At least they have a monitor.
Secret of the Ice Cave is an allegedly child-friendly take with kids as the bickering romantics, but it probably features more David Mendenhall than most film fans would like, and definitely more Class A drugs, castration jokes, and threats of child rape. In fact, the tone's so weird, even Michael Moriarty talking to his underage daughter about sex while eating a banana doesn't really stand out.
Maybe if you hadn't stayed celibate since Mama died, you'd stop seeing sex everywhere. When was the last time you even a girl?
At the adult end of the spectrum, River of Death took Europe's hard-edged approach, aimed as it is at Canon's core audience of bloodthirsty males. And it's good. Meanwhile, their Firewalker tries to have the best of both worlds with its tepid stew of anemic action and pre-war put-downs.
Stop acting like a dadgum sissy!
Chuck Norris had been wanting to get aboard the Indy bandwagon from the start, but it took a couple of years to convince Menachem Golan it was a good idea, and even longer to find a suitably unimaginative script they both liked. The one they settled on dealt with a standard-issue treasure hunt conducted by a trio of displaced Americans, a young woman who's highly motivated but out of her depth, and a pair of seasoned male adventurers, one a taciturn, deadpan tough guy, the other a fast-talking, charismatic blowhard with a wisecrack for every situation. Chuck plays the latter.
In 3 hours, your flesh will begin to blister. 2 hours later, your tongues will swell.
And you'll still be bald.
It's like casting John Wayne in a role written for Bob Hope, so Cannon gave Chuck as much quality support as they could, drafting in safe hands Melody Anderson and Louis Gossett Jr. to play the love interest and what was now a sidekick.
You said your mother was a pig and your father was a dog.
You mention my sister?
It's not a well-made movie with limp, lazy, inconsequential action and a screenplay that doesn't cover how or why our heroes have teamed up, or properly explain what it is they're searching for.
Aztecs, Mayans, Spaniards, all on an Indian reservation. It doesn't jive.
And as much as it hurts to admit it, Chuck's absurdly miscast. The great man simply wasn't meant for romantic repartee or witty one-liners.
Jeez, I didn't tell him to jump.
Apart from the misguided casting, Firewalker also struggles with a worn-out formula. There's only so many times you can watch an indignant adventurer tell a high-strung prima donna that high heels are no good in the jungle. By the late 80s, it seemed the best way to make this kind of movie memorable was to push it too far, either with sleaze, humour or both, which is how Tennessee Buck came to take Kathy Shower up the Limpopo.
How can anyone shoot like that? And when they've been drinking?
Takes a lot of practice. 4 or 5 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You practice shoot that much?
No, I drink that much.
Beyond this exhausted strand of incompatible romances, there were other ideas floating about in Hollywood, because Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom had ushered in the splintering phase, when a mother movie's imitations begin to loosen the apron strings and spare off in different directions.
Someone's had sex on this table.
Vibes has mismatched protagonists slowly falling in love as they race to find a lost Incan city, but they and their movie are entirely different to anything that had gone before. Our heroes are a nebbish psychic and a streetwise medium who was played by Jeff Goldblum and Cyndi Lauper share great chemistry, while leaving room for this guy to steal his scenes.
I break you like a twig. Understand?
Yes. I loved your last movie. What was that called? Conan the Nurse? Okay, no trouble.
The Spring goes for high-minded erotica, which is as terrible and boring as it sounds, while Treasure of the Moon Goddess dabbles in amiable farce, when Linnea Quigley is confused for a deity. I'm not sure which is which. And then there's Bloodstone.
What's in a name, William Shakespeare?
You, David Mamet.
The worst of these alternative adventurers has to be the urban indie, the cut-price opportunists who were budget-limited to plying their trade within a 10-mile radius of downtown LA. I guess we should be grateful for them because it's about time for an unmitigated shit show.
John Carradine, Cameron Mitchell, and Sybil Danning dare you to join them on a journey into hell on Earth. Who will survive the tomb?
Apparently the idea for the tomb came to Fred Olen Ray when someone at Roger Corman's New World Pictures tipped him off they were splashing out on a best-selling thriller of the same name and had big plans for a respectable adaptation.
You said yourself this tomb isn't like any other tomb.
Ray reasoned he could spend a few weeks knocking out an ultra-low-budget mummy movie, give it the same title, then get Corman to pay him to change it. But the big man didn't bite, and Ray had to figure out a way to sell this rubbish, which is about an Egyptian vampire murdering the collectors who bought her smuggled golden scarabs.
Are you trying to tell me that somebody broke in here, ripped out a guy's heart just to steal a bug?
Somehow it was a big hit on home video, but it really is a con job. Of the 3 top-billed stars, only Cameron Mitchell appears in more than one scene, and he spends less than a minute standing on his back legs, preferring to sit at a desk with his script close by.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
A full 20 minutes of the movie was shot in just 2 nights when someone left a medieval castle in Ray's studio. Despite this artwork, there's absolutely no adventuring, and the acting's something else.
What have you done to him?
Let's just say he won't be getting any older.
Oh my God.
It was Michelle Bauer's first movie with Ray, but she was already learning.
That's no way to act.
These movies may be shameless cash-ins, but that's arguably better than being self-aware or deliberately ironic, which is an affliction that struck a number of imitations in the latter part of the 80s.
Who the hell do you think you are? Indiana Jones?
Jake Speed was one of the first to wink at us, thanks to an ultimately pointless reality-blurring conceit positioning the eponymous hero as both fictional paperback adventurer and real-life miscast actor spouting terrible dialogue.
Don't worry. When you're right, nothing can happen to you.
With self-awareness came parody, a combination that's most egregious in Jane and the Lost City, the indie-exploiting adaptation of a once-popular British comic. It comes close, but isn't entirely without merit, having the imagination to pit Flash Gordon against Jasper Carrot and Octopussy.
It's not fair. A whole week and a haven't tortured anyone I was so looking forward to.
Heinrich.
In the mines of Kilimanjaro, it's the 1930s. Don't let the 70s cars fool you. And the Nazis are financing their build-up to war by plundering an African diamond mine we're told only they know about, despite Chinese gangsters, American academics, Kenyan rangers, British spies, and African tribesmen all knowing about it too. Not to mention the Amazon women who trigger some kind of breakdown in the editor every time they show up.
If I say you may see her, it will only be on one condition.
Well, if you put it that way, I guess I can't refuse, can I?
All right, go. You may see her. But afterward...
Mines of Kilimanjaro also proves this genre is determined to offend as many people as possible by having white actors portray as many non-white ethnicities as possible.
You're fooling around. Nuts to you.
Having traded the jungles of Asia for the mountains of Africa, Italy's exploitationeers next headed to South America, where Top Line blended Indy with the Terminator, among other things. I'm all for this kind of thing. Raiders of the Lost Ark ends with a balmy metaphysical massacre that gives its imitators license to be as ridiculous as they like. But they seldom bother. Indiana Jones movies are supernatural, most of their imitators aren't. Top Line, though, really pushes the boat out, imagining that for the last 500 years aliens have been using robots to rule Earth. It even makes Uncle George Kennedy a cynical Nazi.
I don't trust anyone.
Leaving Italy and heading to France, we find Jess Franco up to his usual antics.
I knew you when you were a little girl, my poor child. Now all has changed. You shall be my daughter now.
Franco shot most of Golden Temple Amazons on the fly in 1983, capturing lots of context-free footage of Analia Ivers hanging about a jungle. After sitting on a shelf for a few years, the material fell into the hands of French pornographer Alain Payet, who turned it into something he called a movie.
Go away!
Take little Liana away. What little girl forget terrible day?
Further afield, and as far as we can reasonably get from Jess Franco, Sky Pirates is a charming Australian wartime sci-fi adventure that lands Air Force pilot John Hargreaves in the middle of the Philadelphia experiment, but doesn't quite know what to do next. To be honest, it's all the better for it, and you'd be hard-pushed to have more fun with an Indy knockoff. Meanwhile, South Africa offered a parody in Duel of the Gods, and while it resists the urge to depict tribespeople with white actors in blackface, as was standard practice back in the serials, it apparently couldn't help itself when it came to South Asian characters.
We're all in the same boat, sir. We're all attempting to get to the Red Cross Hospital. We're simply inquiring what the trouble could be. Where are you from? I'm from Calcutta, sir.
No, you're from Cape Town. I don't know what I was expecting from a South African comedy about Nazis, but outside Marcus Weyers, underrated star of The Gods Must Be Crazy, there's not a whole lot to like here. Weyers plays a character called Snowy Grinder, so I suppose there's that. But there's also this guy, a walking, talking manifestation of British colonialism.
But he did give me a personal message to pass on to you. I know. Chin up. Don't drink too much and don't rape anybody important.
Boy, where's Indiana Jones when you really need him?
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was released in May of 1989, a key year in the history of the action blockbuster. Tango and Cash, which is often considered the last of the archetypal 80s actioners, arrived a few months later, but not before Tim Burton's Batman, which many, including Sly Stallone, believe stole their thunder.
Can somebody tell me what kind of a world we live in where a man dressed up as a bat gets all of my press?
If anything, this may have played into Indy's hands, and therefore those of his imitators. After a decade swimming against a tide of testosterone whipped up by the likes of John's Rambo and Matrix, he suddenly found himself washed along with a new wave of more relatable, multi-dimensional heroes.
Listen, you're not pissing in somebody's pool, are you?
Yeah, and I'm fresh out of chlorine.
With monosyllabic tough guys out of fashion, Italian filmmakers in particular were left rudderless just at a time when their industry was crashing. As ever, other filmmaking nations were ready to pick up the slack. Pinoy comedy legend Vic Sotto, imagine a Filipino Bob Saget, made a habit of spoofing icons of US pop culture, often as part of prolific comedy troupe Tito, Vic and Joey. One of their first movies together was 1979 Saturday Night Fever cash-in Swing It Baby, while the 80s brought the likes of She-Man, Mistress of the Universe, and the Superman-derived Super 1-2-3. Crocodile Jones, the son of Indiana Dundee, happened in 1990 and sees Sotto playing a loser unable to hold down a job in a bakery until fate intervenes and thrusts him into an adventure of some kind. There are no subtitles, so I don't know the ins and outs, but there's no mistaking the hijacked IP.
Hindi ganyan, itutok mo! Paano
These Pinoy movies are pretty hit and miss. There can be incredible, indescribable highs, such as the musical number that rounds out 1991's Alias, Batman and Robin, while on the whole they tend to lack action and rely too much on childish humour. But that scattershot nature means that if you hang in there long enough, there's always a chance you'll be rewarded for your patience. And in Crocodile Jones, that reward is the addition of long overdue lyrics to Indy's theme music.
Crocodile Jones, the movie. Don't you worry, you will be happy. It's a funny comedy, realistic, fantastic, terrific.
Nearly 2 decades later, Sotto made another Indy knockoff, Time to Ride the Coattails of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. To be honest, I don't know what to say about a film that unlocks an ancient tomb with a child's magical arse, but once again, I'm happy with the lack of subtitles. Nothing good can come from knowing the why of things like this. More traditional and less confusing is Operation Golden Phoenix from amateur martial artist and professional delusional egotist Jalal Mary. The scion of a wealthy family of Beirut-based jewellers, he began his career managing their Canadian business interests before deciding to give it all up and become an action star.
I'm about to do something really stupid.
Casting directors weren't sure he'd made the right decision and parts were hard to come by, so he started his own production company and made a number of lowish budget martial arts movies with stars like Cynthia Rothrock and bipeds like Olivier Gruner.
I've already apologized.
But Mary's preferred star was of course himself, and the characters he chose to play are classics of ego-sploitation. Hugely desirable, totally indestructible, and profoundly unoriginal.
Don't leave the van, stay in here, it's safer.
The best defense is a good offense.
Operation Golden Phoenix has an Indy theme with a treasure hunt leading Mary's security expert to Lebanon in search of something that's never actually referred to as a golden phoenix. But it's otherwise typical of his work in that it's just not quite right.
I'm innocent, damn you! I didn't kill my partner, I didn't steal the treasure, you stupid idiot! It's not true, back to yourself.
Around the same time, and only 100 or so miles south in Jerusalem, filmmaker Dror Sorif was staging a very different Middle Eastern treasure hunt, one that looks like being as boring as Serpent of Death until John Rhys Davies turns up and Peter O'Toole is revealed to be King Herod himself. Naturally, he races a chariot through the city centre shooting at people, and was more English than history thinks.
As you know, that's often the case of wealthy, eccentric men.
Unfortunately, its teenage protagonists curse the seventh coin with all the downsides of a kids' movie without it actually being one, which I didn't realise until Herod began shooting his henchmen in the head. On the bright side, O'Toole is absolutely terrifying. Delivering a performance of such depth and intensity, it stands out a mile in a movie like this. And to be fair, the main kid's good too. He's played by British actor Navin Chowdhury, who went on to star in soap opera EastEnders and appear in seminal shows like Doctor Who and Charlie Brooker's superb police parody A Touch of Cloth.
Kept himself to himself, never been found dead before, so this is out of character.
The Seventh Coin may not be a kids' movie, but it's about the only one of these things from the mid-90s that isn't. Considering how child-friendly Indy is, it's surprising there weren't more 80s movies like Secret of the Ice Cave, and that the ones there were are so old-fashioned. But the first infant-oriented Indy of any great value didn't come along until 1990.
It's a movie so big, so special, so exciting, no TV can hold it. DuckTales the movie, Treasure of the Lost Lamp.
DuckTales was the first animated series Disney ever produced for syndication, and as such was lavished with attention by the TV division responsible for it. So when it came time for the Mouse House to produce their first cartoon feature adaptation, they ruffled feathers by entrusting it to the same team, who kind of nailed it.
Who are you? Where's Kelly Papa? Did Rome fall yet?
The animation's fine, the characterization's spot on, and the genie-centric plot's a perfect fit that sets up some good jokes.
Las Vegas must be someplace if Caesar moved his palace there.
Kelly! I'm so sorry I missed your lecture. It's impossible London traffic.
Hello, Simon. Oh, do you remember...
MacGyver.
Another TV show to go full Indiana Jones for a feature was MacGyver, which spent 7 seasons pinballing between Dr. Jones, James Bond and the A-Team before a plot about the lost treasure of Atlantis provided a definitive direction.
It's the Ark of Solon.
The show itself had done indie-heavy episodes before. The Eye of Osiris reconstructs scenes including Marion's introduction in Raiders, and two-parter Legend of the Holy Rose, in which MacGyver builds an aeroplane out of bamboo and bin bags, works like a dry run for a feature-length knockoff.
Just tell me what you want me to do!
Help me find the Holy Grail.
Indiana Jones already did that. I saw the movie.
Brian Blessed's the only notable addition to the usual lineup, playing maverick archaeologist Professor Atticus, and he was born for this stuff.
Look! The gods march in rank!
But apart from Boss Nass, about the only highlight comes when MacGyver finds some old rockets in a shed and uses them to escape a Balkan war zone, which definitely isn't London's Battersea Power Station. Double Blast is aimed at an even younger audience, and apparently one more patient than me.
But then on my 8th birthday, my mommy made me a really big cake, and I blew out all the candles. Be quiet!
There are kids and they adventure, but I didn't last long enough to learn the details. There's always at least one movie I can't handle, and apparently my limit is Robert Zsazsa getting beaten up by children. It just isn't right.
I love my mom.
Max is Missing is a perfectly tolerable but otherwise unremarkable Disney-flavoured family movie, and much like The Secret of the Ice Cave, it too occasionally forgets the family bit.
Well, that's a shame, because if you can't help us find him and our property, I'm gonna tear your liver out and feed it to you.
And very similar is Legend of the Lost Tomb, which comes from the same production company.
Let's get to that bus.
Yeah, right behind you, Indy.
When archaeologist Dr. Eric Leonard discovers the location of the tomb of Ramesses II, he's immediately kidnapped by Stacy Keach, which forces his 15-year-old son and 16-year-old female research assistant to go full Indy in order to save the world or something. It's an incredibly out-of-focus movie, but Keach makes up for it with his performance.
Stealing is such a harsh word, Eric. As an archaeologist, one has to spend half his life on his knees, brushing away the sands of time. For what reason? Why?
It takes about 20 years for the typical mother movie to become reborn. At least that's how long the major studios tend to wait before repackaging them for a new generation. Audiences need to forget, filmmaking needs to evolve, and the schlock merchants need to vacate the area. Then one studio or another will essentially repeat the formula, only bigger, faster and shinier.
The Mummy.
The Mummy might predate Indiana Jones as a property, but as we've seen before, that doesn't mean it can't be retooled into an imitation. Although not based on a novel, the story told in Universal's 1932 original,
Good heavens, what a terrible curse.
Hammer's 1959 remake,
He who robs the graves of Egypt dies.
and Stephen Sommers' 1999 reimagining are very similar, but the last presents it entirely differently.
There is a curse upon this chest.
Curse my ass.
Yeah, who cares?
That difference is largely down to Indy, because like Dr. Jones, Summers is more interested in adventure than horror, in the search for the thing more than in the dealing with it.
Don't be ridiculous. We're scholars, not treasure hunters.
As a result, we're past the halfway point before the mummy's found and resurrected, while the earlier movies each begin right outside his tomb and have him up and about within 11 minutes.
For heaven's sakes, what is it?
He went for a little walk.
This is a fantastic movie and I love everything about it. Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, the surprising Sam Raimi influence on the visual design, the ridiculous hokiness, and especially the way the characters try to resolve all their metaphysical problems by shooting at them.
All right, then.
And of course, soon after The Mummy came Lara Croft Tomb Raider.
No! Time is broken here.
Putting that unpleasantness behind us, National Treasure kind of rounds out this triptych of turn-of-the-millennium indie updates. Nicolas Cage knows exactly how to do this.
I'm not gonna let you steal the Declaration of Independence.
This wave of blockbusters petered out in the mid-2000s with a bunch of uninspired sequels, adjacents, and deviations that are thankfully beyond this episode's remit.
Rudimentary phallus.
But, like repressed Edwardians plundering a mummy's tomb, they awakened something evil.
Me, well, like a spy. Kinda. Only I make maps.
In the early 2000s, archaeology, maps and relics became a thing again in B-movies and on TV. But at best, that meant Noah Weil as a librarian, while at worst it could lead to Patrick Swayze as a Quatermain, and at weirdest, Jean-Claude Van Damme as an Hasidic Jew.
Something is not kosher here.
Bruno Mattei tried to inject some Italian flair back into this moribund subgenre with La Tomba, one of his shiftless late career novelties. Naturally, he rips off scenes from Indy and movies like The Mummy, but also steals actual footage from them. Sam Raimi's Army of Darkness contributes about a dozen shots to one sequence alone. And you might recognise these skeletons and this ghost from Raiders of the Lost Ark. The man's nerve was incredible.
Maybe he did do something wrong, but who are you to judge it? What's the matter with you? Nothing.
La Tomba has its moments, but all in all, this is a dismal movie from a dismal era, full of bland heroes and obnoxious villains.
Yeah, Consolidated Oil's here now, and we're drilling whether your goblins like it or not, so piss off.
But there is one country we can always rely on. "20 years after starring in his first Indian indie clone, Tollywood champion Chiranjeevi made another, and of course it was released as Indian Jones. Reflecting the commitment of its title, it's a more determined rip-off than the earlier movie, and sets about plundering the franchise in stages. There's the Peruvian idol cave sequence from Raiders, only with added CG snakes. Then the hunt for the Shankara stones from Temple of Doom, only with added CG snakes. And then the test of faith invisible bridge scene from The Last Crusade, only with added, well, not this time, but it is pretty shameless. Oh yeah, there are added CG snakes. Two years later, the generally better funded Bollywood industry in Mumbai gave us Naksha, which is proof positive that budget doesn't equate to originality. At first, this thing's a movie blender. Evil Dead chases this guy through the woods and Tomb Raider hides in a secret room in this guy's house. But it soon settles into a faithful remake of the rock movie The Rundown, until it decides to be The Last Crusade, only with a high-vis safety vest for a MacGuffin. Watching this kind of Indian action movie, it's as if the 80s never ended and everything just carried on getting sillier. In 2008, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull only served to swell the ranks of this underwhelming army. But considering how it was received, feeding fans stuff like Alan Quatermain and the Temple of Skulls or Jack Hunter and the Lost Treasure seems like arriving on the scene of a mugging and pickpocketing the traumatized victim.
Why are you crying?
Everything's so clean and crisp and tightly framed, and the movies are all so dry and serious you have to project the funny onto them.
Let's see. What is it that you have always wanted to do and I have never wanted to do?
It's disgusting. There's a lady present.
Even Hong Kong lost its way. Undiscovered Tomb ends with a straight-faced "it was all a dream" cop-out after 2 hours of fighting in trees. And fighting trees. Michelle Yeoh let the side down with The Touch, while Jackie Chan did it twice with The Medallion and Chinese Zodiac, a third entry in his once bulletproof Armour of God series, for which he earned a record-breaking 15 on-screen credits and a fractured tailbone. Brazil, Zsazsa and the Lost City of Gold stars Blanca and involves a hunt for Viking treasure in the Amazon rainforest, while Norway's Ragnarok looks for it in Scandinavia, which seems a more logical location. Meanwhile, Germany returned John Rhys Davies to the country that's provided him with steady employment for more than 4 decades.
To Egypt.
Nobody cares anymore.
That will not stop me!
The next chapter in the story of the Indiana Jones derivative is almost identical to the last, only much worse. The Mummy's rebooted, Tomb Raider follows, and then a third attempt plays the Patriot card to draw on American history for its mythology. It's uncanny. I'm not getting into this stuff, but I would like to congratulate Uncharted on its sublimely ridiculous crescendo, and William Shatner for his performance in The Tomb Devil's Revenge.
Prepare yourself, oh my brothers, for the white twin of heaven has come to castrate the sun. Castrate the sun? By God, if they didn't.
I should probably acknowledge some omissions, including borderliners like The Goonies, not to mention Raiders of the Lost Ark, the adaptation, which despite being a cut above the average is still a fan film, and I just can't open that can of worms.
Your generation thinks nothing of seeing Indiana Jones 13 times. Well, I happen to feel the same about Mozart.
I try to avoid TV for the same reason, but wouldn't have covered the legitimate indie shows anyway, because they're legitimate. It's worth mentioning Magnum P.I.'s Season 8 episode, Legend of the Lost Art, though. It's based quite closely on Raiders, and Higgins makes Magnum dress like Indy.
And why do I have to wear this hat?
To keep the sun out of your eyes.
Which seems a bit like rubbing Tom Selleck's nose in it, considering it was his commitment to the show that prevented him playing the real thing.
No more traps, no more caves, no more lost art. Lost art!
Before I go, there is one final movie that might be worth excavating from a streaming service. And fittingly, it goes right back to the beginning of everything.
Alan Quatermain.
Hello, Darius, you old pirate.
In this version of the Allenverse, Quatermain's an archaeologist recruited by the British government to beat a bunch of neo-Nazis to the Spear of Destiny.
The spear is the key to unlocking the full power of my grandfather's machine. We will start a new Reich, a new dawn.
But what is the Spear of Destiny, I hear you ask?
Some say it was the very spear that pierced the side of Jesus Christ on the cross, giving it divine energy.
There you go. Incidentally, this actor's called David Hardware, and I recommend checking out his show reel on YouTube.
Pedal faster, you bastard.
So Alan's racing the Nazis to the Spear of Destiny, and for our amusement, the search takes place entirely either in this corridor, which plays locations in London, Egypt and Argentina, and this rainforest. It's lucky they've got that machete.
I found it in a tomb in Jerusalem.
Technically, this is almost as bad as a movie can get, and it won't be for everyone, but by golly, it warmed my cockles with its wily nonsense.
Shoot them in the head, they're zombies!
Whether knockoff, fake-out or cash-in, the fact there's even a landscape for the movies in this video to occupy is down to Indiana Jones. In a way, this seems like a subgenre that shouldn't be as popular as it still is. Like the Western, it feels inherently old-fashioned, not the kind of thing children of the space age and beyond would be interested in.
We ain't got time for this old school nonsense.
But they are. One of these surprisingly freaky children is mine, and Indy's been a favourite since he was 5. Indiana Jones didn't just come to define this subgenre, he elevated it from the margins to the mainstream, validating it for the generations and filmmakers who followed. When Disney greenlit Jungle Cruise, a $200 million period hunt for an immortality MacGuffin with nary a pirate in sight, it was Indiana Jones that assured them there'd be an audience, not Secret of the Incas or distant relative the African Queen.
I'd like to come back here someday.
And Indy's still the paradigm to which everything else is compared. Dora and the Lost City of Gold wasn't equated to Nyoka or even Lara. Any befuddled critic wanting to put her in a box simply called her Indiana Jones for Zoomers. Likewise, Uncharted was called Indiana Jones for the Marvel crowd, and Lost City was Indiana Jones for the profoundly undemanding. The point is, despite Indy not inventing this genre, and whether or not that genre's modern exponents directly steal anything from him, the whole thing still hangs from him, despite the years, the mileage, and the kingdom of the crystal skull. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.
Come on, let's go to the pub.